Imagine you are playing a quick, seemingly harmless game of rummy on your smartphone.
Right.
You deposit a small amount of money into your digital wallet just to, join a table.
Yes, a very standard action.
Exactly. You play your hand, maybe you win, maybe you lose. But what actually happens to that specific deposit the millisecond it leaves your bank account?
That is the real question, isn't it?
It really is, because in the blink of an eye, your deposit is pooled with thousands of others.
Right.
It is instantly converted, mathematically disguised, perhaps even masked as a software licensing fee on some corporate ledger.
Yes, very common.
And then seamlessly routed to a server sitting in Curacao or Malta.
Exactly.
What felt like a simple card game to you was, in reality, a microscopic data point in a multi-layered, highly sophisticated, cross-border financial ecosystem.
It is massive.
Welcome to the ODFC Academy podcast. For this particular deep dive, we are asking you to really slow down.
Yes, take a breath.
Prepare for a highly methodical, deliberate, and deeply analytical examination of a subject that is quite literally reshaping the digital economy in India as we speak.
Absolutely. Our mission today is to systematically unpack a very critical and highly anticipated report.
Right.
It is titled The Indian Online Gaming Enforcement and FEMA Compliance Review. And look, we are not simply reading the headlines here.
No, definitely not.
We are synthesizing public reporting on actual enforcement actions. We are mapping the intricate timelines of how these investigations evolved. And, most importantly, dissecting the severe compliance issues surrounding the Foreign Exchange Management Act, which, as you know, is FEMA.
FEMA, right.
Exactly. We will be examining this architecture across 6 major online gaming matters.
Just to jump in quickly as a brief housekeeping note to set the context for you, the dates we will discuss today are based entirely on public reporting.
Correct.
We are utilizing month or year estimates where the exact specific dates have not been explicitly disclosed by the regulatory authorities.
Right, because those are often kept confidential during ongoing probes.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this. It was not that long ago, that online gaming in India was viewed primarily through the lens of simple entertainment.
It was a consumer protection issue at best, really.
Right, exactly. But that evolution has been exceptionally rapid. Today, it is no longer just about whether a game relies on skill or chance.
No, it has moved far beyond that.
It is transformed into an incredibly complex web of cross-border data transfers, virtual asset movements, and really opaque value transfers.
Very opaque.
And this structural complexity has squarely caught the intense, unyielding scrutiny of the Enforcement Directorate, the ED.
Absolutely.
So we are not just looking at what happened in these enforcement actions. We are going to look at exactly how the regulatory framework, specifically FEMA, is being weaponized by the authorities to deconstruct these digital empires.
What's fascinating here is how the authorities are utilizing a statute that was originally designed for a very different era of international trade.
Right, like an older era.
Yes, an era of physical shipping containers and letters of credit.
Oh, wow, yes.
And they are applying it forcefully to the frictionless, instantaneous world of digital gaming.
It is a massive shift.
It is. See, before we delve into the specific matters outlined in the report, it is absolutely essential that you have a firm grasp of the foundational architecture of FEMA.
Because without that, this just sounds like random police action.
Exactly. If you do not understand this bedrock, the case studies we're about to discuss will simply seem like arbitrary punitive actions. And they are not.
They are very calculated.
Very much so.
Yeah.
They're deeply rooted in specific statutory provisions. So, let us take a very slow, deliberate walk through sections 3, 4, 5, and 6 of the Foreign Exchange Management Act.
I agree completely. We cannot skip the fundamentals. Let us start with Section 3, because in almost every public document we reviewed, Section 3 seems to be the primary net that catches these entities.
It is the ultimate gatekeeper.
How does it actually function as a regulatory gatekeeper, though?
Well, Section 3 is fundamentally the absolute prohibition clause, unless explicitly permitted by the Reserve Bank of India.
Okay.
It deals with unauthorized dealing in foreign exchange. Essentially, it mandates that no person shall deal in or transfer any foreign exchange or foreign security to any person who is not an authorized person.
Like a recognized banking institution.
Exactly, like a recognized bank. Furthermore, it explicitly prohibits making any payment to, or for the credit of, any person resident outside India in any manner, unless it routes through those proper, heavily regulated channels.
Let me ground that in a digital reality for a moment. Are you saying that if a platform in India collects funds from local users,
Yes.
but the corresponding economic value of those funds is somehow being realized by a parent company sitting in a foreign jurisdiction without going through the standard banking authorizations, that alone is a violation.
That is precisely a prima facie violation of Section 3. It is an indirect value transfer.
Wow.
See, Section 3 does not just care about the physical wire transfer of fiat currency, it cares about the settlement of value.
The settlement of value. That is a crucial distinction.
Absolutely. If you create an ecosystem where value accrues offshore, based on domestic Indian activity, and you bypass the authorized dealer banks to effectuate that accrual, you have breached the gatekeeper provision.
That makes the scope of Section 3 incredibly broad. So if Section 3 is the gatekeeper monitoring the flow of value, what then is Section 4? How does the ED apply that differently?
Think of Section 4 as the vault, or rather, the prohibition on maintaining unauthorized vaults.
Unauthorized vaults, okay.
Yeah, yes. Section 4 explicitly restricts any person resident in India from acquiring, holding, owning, possessing, or transferring any foreign exchange, foreign security, or any immovable property situated outside India.
Just having it is the issue.
Right. The critical operative words here are holding and owning.
Wait, let me stop you there. So you're saying even if the original transaction that generated the funds was completely legitimate, say, a perfectly legal software export, simply leaving that money in a foreign bank account without jumping through the requisite RBI hoops turns it into a Section 4 violation.
That is exactly the exposure. It is not just about how the transaction occurred. It is about the unauthorized retention of assets beyond Indian borders.
Oh, I see.
If an Indian gaming company or its resident promoters have set up offshore subsidiaries or are parking their substantial gaming revenues in foreign bank accounts, contrary to the established legal procedures, the Enforcement Directorate will invoke Section 4.
So the act of holding the asset offshore is the continuous violation.
Correct. Every day it sits there unauthorized is a violation.
Understood. So the transaction itself triggers Section 3, but simply holding the unauthorized resulting asset offshore brings Section 4 into play.
Precisely.
Now, as we move to Sections 5 and 6, we enter the highly technical territory of current and capital account transactions. This is where the corporate structuring usually gets deeply entangled, right?
Yes, very entangled. Let us look at Section 5 first. Section 5 governs current account transactions.
Okay, how should we visualize that?
Think of Section 5 like your company's operating budget. These are transactions related to day-to-day business operations, such as trade, services, short-term banking, and credit facilities.
So routine business expenses.
Yes. Under FEMA, you are generally permitted to draw foreign exchange for current account transactions, but the central government, in consultation with the Reserve Bank of India, imposes reasonable restrictions.
How does that play out in the gaming sector? Because from what I've seen, no company writes illegal gambling remittance on their bank forms.
Precisely, they do not. The issue arises when gaming companies remit funds abroad under the guise of legitimate business expenses.
I see.
They might label a massive outward remittance as software licensing fees or server hosting charges or even global marketing expenses.
Right.
But if the ED determines that the underlying reality is actually the repatriation of unpermitted gaming proceeds, it means the foreign exchange was not used for a permitted, legitimate current account purpose.
So the form submitted to the bank was a mischaracterization?
Exactly. It is a fabricated pretense.
And then we have Section 6, which deals with the heavier structural movements of money. If Section 5 is the operating budget, Section 6 feels like the corporate DNA.
That is an excellent analogy. Section 6 governs capital account transactions.
Huh?
These are transactions that fundamentally alter the assets or liabilities, including contingent liabilities outside India of persons resident in India, or conversely, assets or liabilities in India of persons resident outside India.
So we are talking about major structural shifts.
Exactly. We're talking about foreign direct investment, the issuance of shares, share buybacks, overseas direct investments, and complex corporate restructuring.
And this is heavily monitored.
Section 6 is heavily, stringently regulated by the RBI. When we look at these gaming entities, if they are issuing equity to foreign investors or utilizing convertible notes or engaging in downstream investments without strictly adhering to the regulatory framework, they fall afoul of Section 6.
But the paperwork must be a nightmare.
The reporting requirements here are exhaustive, and failure to comply is viewed as a structural breach by the ED.
Wow. See, if you are building a tech stack in India right now, or you are advising a corporate board, these 4 pillars are the exact tripwires you need to be watching.
Absolutely.
Section 3 for unauthorized dealing, Section 4 for unauthorized holding, Section 5 for current account mischaracterization, and Section 6 for structural capital account violations.
That is the perfect summary.
With that essential framework established, we can see how it applies in the real world. Let us look at our first major case study. We are going to begin with a domestic matter to demonstrate exactly how allegedly illicit funds are layered locally, right here in India, before we even touch the cross-border complexities.
Yes, the foundational layering.
We are looking at the Gameskraft matter.
The Gameskraft matter is really a masterclass in understanding the sheer complexity of modern corporate financial layering.
It really is.
According to the Enforcement Directorate's public release, this case originated from allegations of cheating online real money rummy players.
Just standard consumer cheating claims initially.
Right. But the cheating aspect, while serious, is merely the predicate offense. From a regulatory and enforcement perspective, what the agency is actually scrutinizing is the subsequent, highly sophisticated movement of those funds through the domestic financial system.
To understand the ED's logic here, we have to look at how this escalated, because it didn't start as a massive FEMA probe.
No, it did not.
What started as standard player complaints in mid-2023 regarding platform irregularities and alleged cheating eventually transformed into a massive regulatory crackdown.
Yes.
Moving from late 2023 into early 2024, those user complaints crystallized into first information reports, or FIRs, filed with local police, which prompted preliminary investigations.
Sure.
But the structural shift occurred in 2024. That is when the ED invoked Section 17 of the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, or PMLA, to carry out extensive searches linked to alleged money laundering and, crucially, corporate layering.
That was the turning point.
And now, as we sit in 2025, we are seeing ongoing, aggressive asset tracing activities with heavy scrutiny on their corporate financial flows.
I want to focus on your mention of Section 17 of the PMLA.
Please do.
Section 17 is the provision that grants the Enforcement Directorate the extraordinary power of search and seizure. However, the ED cannot invoke it in a vacuum.
Right, they need a trigger.
Exactly. It requires a scheduled offense, which, in this specific timeline, was provided by the multiple FIRs registered by the local police for cheating.
Ah, so the FIRs gave them the jurisdiction.
Precisely. Once the ED has that scheduled offense locked in, their mandate allows them to step in and investigate the proceeds of crime. And this is where we must dissect the how. How were these funds allegedly layered to obscure their origin?
The public report details an extensive list of layering methods. We are talking about dividends, share buybacks, mutual funds, corporate bonds, convertible notes, equity issuance, movable assets, and the purchasing of high-value items.
A very long, very complex list.
To put this in perspective for you, think of this layering process as a financial Russian nesting doll.
That is a great way to picture it.
You start with the original user funds, the smallest doll in the center. If you want to obscure that origin from an auditor, you place it inside a larger doll, perhaps by investing the surplus corporate funds into standard mutual funds or corporate bonds.
Right.
Then you place that inside an even larger doll, maybe by initiating a share buyback scheme or issuing massive dividends to holding companies.
Yes. With every new layer, every new financial instrument utilized, the outer appearance of the money changes.
It totally transforms.
It does. Its legal character transforms. It becomes exponentially more difficult for a standard auditor or local regulator to open up all those dolls and trace the funds back to the individual rummy player's initial deposit.
Because it just looks like corporate finance at that point.
Exactly. The financial Russian nesting doll creates intentional distance, both transactional distance and temporal distance, between the source of the funds and their current manifestation on a balance sheet.
But wait, investing corporate surplus in a mutual fund or issuing a dividend is standard corporate practice.
Absolutely standard.
How does the ED look at a normal business function and classify it as illicit layering? And how does our FEMA primer apply to this nesting doll?
The regulatory lens shifts entirely based on the predicate offense. When a corporate entity utilizes instruments like buybacks, convertible notes, and equity distributions, they are not operating in a purely domestic vacuum, especially if there is any foreign investment or non-resident holding involved in their broader corporate structure.
Ah, okay.
If the funds layered through these standard instruments eventually result in an indirect value transfer to a foreign entity, Section 3 is immediately triggered.
Right. Our gatekeeper again.
Yes. If the layering results in the creation of assets abroad contrary to the law, we are looking at Section 4.
The vault.
Correct. But the most prominent regulatory hurdle in this specific type of corporate structuring is Section 6, subsection 3, read alongside the Foreign Exchange Management Non-Debt Instruments, or NDI, rules of 2019.
Let us break down those NDI rules. I want to make sure this is crystal clear. Why are they so critical when a company simply issues a convertible note or executes a share buyback?
See, the Reserve Bank of India and the Government of India heavily regulate exactly how foreign capital enters and exits Indian entities. The NDI framework dictates strict pricing guidelines.
You can't just make up a share price.
Exactly. You cannot simply value your shares arbitrarily to benefit a foreign investor or to aggressively move money out of the country. There are also very strict investor eligibility criteria. Furthermore, there are exhaustive, non-negotiable reporting regulations.
Right, and this is where forms like the FCGPR come into play, correct? Explain how those function in plain English.
Yes. When shares or convertible notes are issued to non-residents, a form called FCGPR, which stands for Foreign Currency Gross Provisional Return, must be meticulously filed.
Okay.
Think of the FCGPR as a mandatory birth certificate for foreign capital entering the Indian economy. It proves where the money came from, who holds the equity, and that it entered through legitimate channels.
Birth certificate, that's a good way to remember it.
And when shares are subsequently transferred between residents and non-residents, the FCTRS form Foreign Currency Transfer of Shares is required. Think of that as the passport stamp for the capital moving across jurisdictions.
So if the Gameskraft structure involved non-resident holdings, every single dividend paid, every buyback executed, and every convertible note converted would be subjected to these stringent reporting requirements.
Exactly. And here is the fatal flaw the ED looks for. If the original funds, the smallest doll in your analogy, are deemed to be the illicit proceeds of a scheduled offense, then every subsequent birth certificate or passport stamp filed with the RBI is essentially a forged document.
Oh, wow.
Every FEMA filing built on that tainted foundation becomes a misrepresentation.
This is a critical takeaway. What we are seeing here is that routine, standard financial instruments, which are completely normal corporate activities for a growing tech company, can and will be flagged as sophisticated layering tools by enforcement agencies if the underlying primary business model is under a cloud of suspicion.
Yes, everything is scrutinized.
An innocent mutual fund investment becomes a node in a money laundering network. It is an incredibly precarious position for any chief financial officer to navigate.
Absolutely. The domestic layering we see in these cases is often merely the preparatory phase. It is the consolidation and sanitization of capital before attempting to move it beyond the jurisdictional reach of Indian authorities.
Preparing it for the leap across the border.
Exactly. Which brings us to the next logical step in the enforcement trail. Once the capital is consolidated, or when a business model is deliberately designed to evade local scrutiny from the absolute outset, we see the emergence of offshore entities.
So the ED realizes that pursuing domestic layering is important, but they also have to tackle platforms that try to sidestep India entirely. Let us move to segment 2, the offshore mirage.
This is where the geography gets very interesting.
We are tracking the enforcement trail to platforms that are deliberately established outside of India. We are talking about foreign registered gaming websites. The ED executed a massive coordinated FEMA search action in 2023 targeting these exact types of platforms.
Yes, very extensive searches.
According to the public reports, these were websites registered in jurisdictions like Curacao, Malta, and Cyprus. And the critical element here is that despite being registered offshore, they were heavily linked to Indian bank accounts operating under highly deceptive proxy names.
Before we dissect how the operation unraveled, we must understand the geographical choices. Curacao, Malta, and Cyprus are not chosen at random by these operators.
Right, there is a specific reason.
They are jurisdictions historically known for offering specialized e-gaming licenses, highly favorable tax regimes, and, historically speaking, a significant degree of corporate opacity.
It's a strategic shield.
Exactly. The intention behind registering a gaming company there is to project an illusion of being entirely outside the purview of the Reserve Bank of India, the local state police, and the Enforcement Directorate. The operators operate under the assumption that by placing their physical servers and corporate registration in Malta, they have built an impenetrable legal shield.
But as we have seen, that shield completely shatters the moment they actually try to collect money from an Indian user.
Instantly shatters.
The warning signs for these platforms were actually flashing long before the ED raids. From 2022 into early 2023, media reports, cybersecurity researchers, and compliance observers began extensively flagging these foreign registered gaming platforms.
They were very visible.
Why? Because they were visibly, actively, and aggressively servicing Indian users, advertising in local languages, and accepting local payment methods.
You cannot hide that kind of footprint.
Exactly. By mid-2023, the ED launched highly targeted operations and FEMA searches. They focused on these sites because they found the connecting bridge, the domestic Indian bank accounts, and the proxy arrangements.
The proxies are the weak link.
Moving into late 2023, the follow-up investigations dug incredibly deep into the payment routing, unmasking the actual account ownership and linking them back to the specific offshore jurisdictions.
See, that connecting bridge is the most critical vulnerability in their operational model. Let's deeply examine the mechanics of this proxy arrangement.
Yes, how does it actually work?
An offshore gaming company operating out of Curacao cannot simply walk into a major Indian bank in Mumbai and open a direct merchant account to collect real money gaming deposits.
The bank would just say no.
Immediately. The bank's internal compliance filters, mandated by the RDI, would block it immediately under FEMA guidelines. Therefore, the offshore entity has no choice but to utilize a local proxy to penetrate the Indian banking system.
How does that actually look in practice? If the ED raids a location, what are they finding?
In practice, they find a highly deceptive front. The offshore operators might set up a seemingly innocuous local enterprise. It might be registered as a garment export business, or a small IT consulting firm, or a logistics supplier.
So on paper, it looks perfectly normal.
Entirely normal. This firm is registered under the name of a local individual who is essentially a dummy director. Often someone completely unaware of the scale of the operation, paid a small monthly fee just to sign documents.
Wow, just a figurehead.
Right. This proxy entity then opens standard Indian bank accounts.
So when an Indian user plays on the Curacao-based website and wants to deposit funds to play poker, the payment gateway doesn't send it to Curacao. It routes the user's funds into the bank account of this dummy IT consulting firm in Delhi.
Exactly.
To the automated Indian banking system, it looks like a standard domestic transfer to a local business for a domestic service.
Precisely. And this is where the FEMA violations begin to cascade rapidly. Yeah. Let us look at the specific triggers. Section 3A and 3B are glaringly violated here.
The unauthorized dealing clauses.
Yes. We are looking at unauthorized dealing in foreign exchange and making payments outside the authorized framework. The local proxy account is actively collecting funds on behalf of a person resident outside India, the Curacao entity.
Which is illegal.
This is an indirect, completely unauthorized settlement of value.
But the proxy firm can't just keep the money in Delhi forever. Eventually, they have to send the pooled funds to the masters in Curacao or Malta. What happens when they initiate that transfer?
That outward remittance triggers the severe scrutiny of Section 5, dealing with current account transactions. The proxy firm might try to send the pooled money to Malta by generating fake invoices, claiming it is paying for specialized software licensing fees or international consultancy services.
Right, creating that paper trail.
But when the ED investigates, cross-references IP logs, and determines that the underlying reality is the remittance of gaming collections, it means the foreign exchange was not used for a permitted current account purpose. The stated purpose was a fabrication designed specifically to bypass the foreign exchange management current account transactions rules of the year 2000.
I want to clarify something for our audience regarding those rules. Under the current account transactions rules of 2000, remittances for certain activities are not just restricted, they are outright prohibited. Correct.
Yes, absolutely prohibited. Schedule 1 of those rules explicitly bans the remittance of lottery winnings, income from racing or riding, and critically, remittance for purchase of lottery tickets, banned or prescribed magazines, football pools, sweepstakes, etc.
So the whole category is banned?
Yes. While online gaming operators might argue their specific app is a game of skill, the act of transferring proceeds through deceptive, fabricated proxy invoicing immediately negates any legitimate defense. It is a clear, undeniable violation of the reporting mechanics.
And we also have to consider the user's perspective here. Why don't individual users just send the money directly to Curacao themselves? I'm thinking about the Liberalized Remittance Scheme, or LRS, which allows citizens to send money abroad.
See, the Liberalized Remittance Scheme allows resident individuals to remit a certain amount of money abroad annually for permitted current or capital account transactions, like paying for a child's education abroad or medical treatment.
Right.
However, funding overseas gaming, gambling websites, or purchasing lottery tickets is strictly excluded from the LRS.
Excluded entirely.
If users were found to be using their credit cards or bank accounts to directly fund these offshore wallets, it would be a direct violation of the LRS and payment routing rules. But the platforms know this.
They know it's blocked.
They know banks will block direct LRS transfers to gambling merchants. That is exactly why they rely on the proxy system. It removes the compliance friction from the user and places the deception on the dummy corporation.
That is incredibly calculated.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, what we are witnessing is the total collapse of the offshore mirage. The illusion of safety provided by a registration in Cyprus or Curacao is entirely shattered the moment a domestic proxy account is utilized to bridge the gap between the Indian player and the offshore server.
The moment it touches Indian soil, basically.
Exactly. The Enforcement Directorate has realized a profound tactical truth. They do not need to fly to Malta to shut down the operation.
They just go to Delhi or Mumbai.
They simply need to trace the IP addresses and payment gateway APIs back to the proxy bank accounts locally. Once they freeze the proxy accounts locally under FEMA, the offshore entity's oxygen supply, the continuous inflow of Indian capital, is immediately and permanently cut off.
That is a very powerful realization. The regulatory jurisdiction isn't defined just by where the company is registered, but by where the payment collection actually occurs.
Right.
But if we pull the thread further, if the offshore sites are the final destination and the proxy accounts are the local collection points, we have to ask, how does the money actually traverse the border?
The infrastructure.
Exactly. What is the infrastructure facilitating this? We are moving on to segment 3, the toll booths of the internet. Let us discuss the highly scrutinized code of payments and Greenifree fire-linked matter.
This is a highly significant case study because it expands the radius of liability. We are no longer just looking at the operators of the games or the proxy directors. We are looking at the facilitators of the payments themselves.
Exactly. And this is where we can start talking about the sheer financial scale of these operations, as financial figures are now permitted in our discussion. The public reporting indicates that the ED froze approximately 68 crore in this specific matter.
68 crore is a substantial freeze.
The core allegation revolves around unauthorized payments and remittances linked to mobile gaming operations, with substantial funds allegedly being transferred to Singapore-linked entities.
Singapore being a major tech hub, yes.
Right. To understand the ED's logic, let's look at the operational timeline. Between 2021 and 2022, Coda Payments and similar related payment processors experienced a massive exponential scale-up in collections from app-based gaming, not just in India, but across various markets.
They were processing millions of microtransactions.
Exactly. By 2023, regulatory attention dramatically intensified, specifically zooming in on the cross-border payment flows emanating from these gaming apps. The reporting explicitly noted the intense scrutiny on massive transfers heading specifically to Singapore.
The volume alone would trigger flags.
And then in 2024, the ED took decisive kinetic action, freezing roughly 68 crore in connection with these alleged unauthorized remittances and highly complex payment routing structures.
See, the core concern for the authorities in this matter is the fundamental movement of money through authorized Indian banking channels and its subsequent outward transfer, all intrinsically linked to a specific digital business model that the authorities view as non-compliant.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, and I want to push back on this regulatory approach for a moment. Let us play devil's advocate.
Please do.
If a payment processor like Coda Payments is functioning essentially as a digital toll booth or a digital highway for user transactions, why are they being held to such strict, almost punitive liability under FEMA for the underlying nature of the gaming apps?
It is a common question.
Think about a physical highway. If a car drives through a toll booth carrying contraband in the trunk, we do not arrest the toll booth operator.
Right, the operator just lifts the barrier.
Exactly. The operator simply facilitates the passage, lifts the boom barrier, and collects the 20 rupee toll. Why is a digital payment processor expected to act as a law enforcement filter for every single digital good, character, skin, or service purchased through their gateway? Is that not an unreasonable, technologically impossible burden?
It is a very compelling argument, and I will note that it is the exact offense often mounted by payment aggregators, gateways, and legal teams across the tech sector.
I'm sure it is.
However, the architecture of FEMA and the Reserve Bank of India's highly specific regulations do not view them merely as passive toll booths. They are viewed as authorized financial intermediaries.
And what does that mean legally?
With that authorization comes a very strict, non-delegable duty of compliance, active monitoring, and due diligence. Let me address your pushback by looking at how sections 3, 4, 5, and 6 are applied to intermediaries.
Please do, because to the layman, or even to a tech founder, punishing the payment processor seems a lot like shooting the messenger.
Let us start with Section 3, unauthorized foreign exchange dealing. When a payment aggregator collects funds in India and actively remits them to a merchant in Singapore, they are not a passive observer. They are acting as the crucial bridge for that foreign exchange dealing.
The bridge itself.
Yes. The RBI has issued exhaustive master directions on the processing and settlement of import and export-related payments. If the payment processor is facilitating outward remittances for digital goods like purchasing in-game currency or a cosmetic item in a game like Garena Free Fire, they must affirmatively ensure that the underlying transaction is legally permitted under Indian law.
Affirmatively ensure it. That's a high bar.
The game itself is deemed to be operating contrary to local laws, or if the digital goods do not qualify as a permitted import of services, the entire remittance becomes unauthorized. The toll booth operator, in this analogy, has been given a specific statutory mandate by the RBI to check the trunks of the cars passing through.
So they're not just toll operators. They are essentially deputized, mandated customs inspectors for the digital border.
Precisely. And this mandate extends heavily into Section 5, dealing with current account remittance issues. The payment processor must file precise, accurate documentation with the authorized dealer banks, the major commercial banks, explaining the exact nature of the outward remittance.
Right.
If they code a transaction as a standard software purchase, but the ED determines through investigation that it is actually the repatriation of gambling profits or unpermitted gaming revenue, the payment processor is held strictly liable for facilitating a mischaracterized current account transaction.
So they can't just say, we didn't know.
No, they cannot claim ignorance if their due diligence was deemed inadequate. Furthermore, under Section 6 in capital account rules, if the proceeds were moved offshore not just as standard operating revenue, but as part of a complex investment settlement or corporate structuring between Indian subsidiaries and Singapore parent entities, the level of scrutiny and required reporting on the payment processor increases exponentially.
And the RBI's specific directions on how payment aggregators operate locally must play a massive role here, particularly regarding how they hold the money before sending it.
They do. The RBI payment and remittance directions strictly dictate how Indian collection accounts, often referred to as nodal accounts or escrow accounts, must be utilized.
Those nodal accounts are heavily watched.
Yes. These accounts are meant to securely hold user funds for a very brief period before settling them with the merchant. They must be used in a manner completely and strictly consistent with permitted gaming or payment flows.
Okay.
If a payment aggregator allows its nodal accounts to be utilized to pool funds that are eventually systematically routed to unverified offshore entities or entities operating in a legal gray area, they are catastrophically failing their regulatory mandate.
Wow, catastrophically failing.
Yes. The freezing of the 68 crore is not just an enforcement action. It is a broadcast signal to the entire fintech industry. Intermediaries cannot claim willful blindness. The infrastructure providers are now held strictly liable for the compliance of the platforms they service.
That is a staggering shift in accountability.
Yeah.
If you are a payment gateway, you have essentially been deputized by the ED and the RBI. You have to understand the intricacies of your merchant's business model, their corporate structuring, and their offshore routing just as well as they do.
Yes, your compliance team has to be as sharp as theirs.
So if fiat currency transfers through traditional banking channels to places like Singapore are becoming this heavily regulated, and the digital toll booths are being audited this strictly, it only makes logical sense that illicit operations would seek out harder to trace alternative avenues.
It is the natural progression.
Which brings us to segment 4, the digital asset frontier. Let us dive into the eNuggets gaming app Matter.
This case represents the natural, albeit highly complex, evolution of evasion tactics. It is a fundamental rule of financial flows. When standard banking channels become hostile due to enhanced compliance and aggressive enforcement, illicit capital inevitably, almost like water, flows toward decentralized, less regulated ecosystems.
And in this era, we are talking about cryptocurrency.
Exactly.
The eNuggets case is genuinely astonishing in its technological scope and the sheer volume of data analyzed. The public reports indicate that the ED traced more than 300 separate accounts and seized or froze substantial assets.
300 accounts is a massive web.
And what makes this case a landmark in Indian regulatory history is the explicit inclusion and seizure of bitcoins, alongside other assets, in connection with this online gaming and app-based fraud probe.
That is a major milestone for the ED.
Let us look at how this developed, because it wasn't overnight. In 2022, a surge of user complaints and highly concerning suspicious transaction reports, or STRs, generated by banks began prompting severe scrutiny of the specific app-based gaming collection ecosystem.
The banks flagged it first.
Right. Throughout 2023 and 2024, the ED and other enforcement agencies engaged in a massive technologically advanced tracing operation. They mapped dozens, eventually scaling to hundreds, of accounts linked to the eNuggets app.
Mapping that network takes incredible resources.
And by the time we reach 2024 and early 2025, we see the culmination of this effort. Major seizures and asset freezes that specifically targeted cryptocurrencies. The investigations were no longer just looking at bank wires. They were probing deep into cross-border flows utilizing virtual assets.
The inclusion of the foreign asset angle, specifically decentralized cryptocurrency like Bitcoin, makes the eNuggets matter incredibly relevant for a deep analysis of how the Prevention of Money Laundering Act and FEMA overlap and interact in a Web3 environment.
Right, because this is where the traditional definitions break down. How do sections 3, 4, 5, and 6 even apply when the foreign value transaction isn't a wire transfer from HDFC Bank to a bank in Singapore, but rather a decentralized crypto transaction on a public blockchain that technically exists everywhere and nowhere simultaneously?
That question is the very frontier of regulatory jurisprudence right now. Let us apply our FEMA pillars to virtual digital assets, or VDAs.
Let's do it.
Under Section 3 and Section 4, the core issue is dealing in, or holding, foreign exchange, or foreign assets, contrary to the law. Historically, foreign assets meant a physical apartment in London or a fiat bank account in Geneva.
Physical, tangible things.
Exactly. But if the illicit proceeds from an Indian gaming app are converted into Bitcoin and held in a non-custodial digital wallet, or parked on a cryptocurrency exchange based in the Seychelles, does that constitute holding a foreign asset?
That is the million-dollar question.
The enforcement agencies are increasingly and successfully arguing that it absolutely does. Crypto-linked transactions are viewed as foreign value transactions being routed entirely outside the permitted banking channels.
So from the ED's perspective, converting rupees to crypto for the purpose of sending value overseas is treated fundamentally as an unpermitted remittance.
Exactly, which brings Section 5 roaring into play. If outward remittances or transfers of value are made via cryptocurrency without a permitted current account purpose, and let me be clear, currently, routing gaming proceeds via crypto is certainly not a permitted purpose. It is a blatant violation.
Section 5 violation right there.
Furthermore, under Section 6, if the accumulation of these bitcoins is deemed to have a capital account character, perhaps acting as an unapproved offshore investment or a foreign asset holding by the promoters to hide wealth, it violates the capital account transaction rules.
It hits every pillar.
Yes. We must also look closely at how the regulatory environment has rapidly adapted. The Ministry of Finance and the RBI have increasingly brought VDA service providers like local crypto exchanges strictly under the PMLA reporting framework. They are now mandated reporting entities.
I want to spend a moment just visualizing the sheer scale of this operation. We are talking about auditing over 300 accounts. In a traditional investigation, that means subpoenaing 300 bank branch managers, waiting weeks for physical or PDF paper statements, manually tracing line items, and building a paper trail.
It used to take years.
But with eNuggets and Bitcoin, we are looking at tracing on a decentralized blockchain. The Enforcement Directorate is no longer just a team of accountants looking at static ledgers.
No, they have upgraded.
They are utilizing advanced blockchain analytics tools. They are tracing specific wallet addresses, mapping transaction hashes, analyzing blockchain hops to see how funds are split, pooled in tumbling services or mixers, and eventually off-ramped at various global exchanges.
It is cyber forensics at its highest level.
It shows a massive, intimidating leap in the technological sophistication of the Enforcement Directorate. They are matching the evasion tactics of the tech founders step for step.
It is a remarkable visualization, and it highlights a critical vulnerability in the evader's strategy. The blockchain is inherently public. It is pseudonymous, yes, but the ledger is visible to everyone, forever.
Right, the data never goes away.
The ED's ability to pierce that pseudonymity, to use forensics to link a specific alphanumeric hash on the Bitcoin ledger to a physical individual operating a fraudulent gaming app out of a specific IP address in India, demonstrates that cryptocurrency is no longer a safe haven for regulatory evasion.
It is not a black box anymore.
Exactly. The tracing of these 300 accounts likely involved an incredibly complex orchestration of cross-referencing ISP logs, exchange KYC records, often obtained through international cooperation treaties and mutual legal assistance requests, and sophisticated on-chain analytics. It represents a total paradigm shift in how FEMA enforcement will be conducted in the digital age.
It really does. It sends a chilling message to operators. The mechanism of transfer, whether it is a low-tech Hawala proxy, a highly legitimate gateway like Coda, or a decentralized, mathematically complex Bitcoin network, doesn't matter as much as the underlying nature of the business.
The ED will follow the value, regardless of the medium.
Which is the perfect, logical transition to our final segment, segment 5, business models under siege. We have spent this entire deep dive looking at the mechanics of moving money, the plumbing of the operation.
Right, the plumbing.
Now, we need to look at the very foundation of the platforms themselves. We are seeing authorities fundamentally reclassifying these business models from the ground up. Let us look at Probo and Winzo.
This is where the regulatory friction reaches its absolute peak. In these cases, it is no longer just about catching a procedural error in a remittance form or finding a hidden proxy account.
It's deeper than that.
The enforcement agencies are challenging the foundational existential premise of these companies' operations.
Let us examine Probo first. The defining allegation here, according to extensive public reports, is that the platform was operating gambling in the guise of gaming.
That phrasing is critical.
And the financial scale of the enforcement action reflects the severity of that allegation. In 2024, general allegations, user complaints, and regulatory interest in various platforms operating real money games and prediction markets began to grow significantly. The scrutiny was intensifying across the board.
Everyone was watching.
By December 2025, the ED took extreme, paralyzing action, reportedly attaching assets worth 117.41 crore. And it is vital to note that this followed an earlier, separate freeze of approximately Euro 284.5 crore.
Massive figures.
As we look at 2025 and onward, there are ongoing, highly contested legal and enforcement proceedings, critically examining every aspect of the business model, the domestic payment flows, and any cross-border components.
See, the specific phrase you highlighted, gambling in the guise of gaming, is the crux of the entire issue. If the core activity of a platform is reclassified by authorities from a constitutionally protected game of skill to an illegal game of chance, the entire financial infrastructure supporting it instantly collapses under FEMA and PMLA scrutiny.
The whole house of cards falls.
Let us look at the FEMA context for Probo. The relevance comes heavily from exactly how user funds were collected, pooled in nodal accounts, and subsequently moved or distributed.
How does the mere pooling of user funds trigger a FEMA violation if the money hasn't left the country yet?
Because under Section 3 and Section 5, if a platform is pooling user funds acting essentially as a financial holding intermediary for thousands of users, and those payment flows eventually cross borders, or are structured through complex intermediaries with foreign investors, the original illegality taints the entire chain.
The original sin taints the rest.
Exactly. If the ED determines the pooling was for gambling, then any unpermitted foreign exchange dealing or indirect routing that occurred using those funds means Section 3 is violently violated.
Even if the outbound payment looked normal.
Yes. If those pooled funds were sent abroad to pay for legitimate-sounding server costs, or to repatriate profits to offshore venture capital investors, and the underlying business is deemed illegal gambling, that there is absolutely no permitted current account purpose under Section 5.
So the foundation is rotten, therefore every transaction built on it is structurally unsound.
Exactly. Furthermore, under Section 6 and the current account transactions rules, if the business model depended on collection or remittance patterns that are inconsistent with permissible use, for example, if massive foreign institutional investors were receiving dividends from a business model that the state views as illicit protective, the capital account structuring is entirely compromised.
So the initial investment is now a liability.
The initial foreign direct investment might have been approved under the assumption it was a tech startup. But if it is reclassified as gambling, the entire capital structure is under threat.
That is an incredibly precarious position. The company argues vehemently they are offering a legal, skill-based prediction platform. But the ED approaches the financial tracing with the working presumption that it is gambling and acts accordingly with asset freezes.
It is a profound clash of definitions.
And now let us look at Winzo, which adds an entirely new layer of complexity to this dynamic. The public reports state that the ED charged the company and its promoters with allegations revolving around rigged real money games and laundering through overseas entities.
That is a very serious escalation.
This is a classic comprehensive overlap case. We have offshore structures, foreign payments, and domestic gaming revenue channels all under simultaneous aggressive review. Look at the timeline here. From 2021 to 2022, Winzo experienced explosive, massive growth as a platform offering both casual skill games and real money formats.
They grew very, very fast.
In 2023, media reports and enforcement interest sharply increased around highly specific allegations of game rigging, meaning the platform was allegedly manipulating outcomes and the movement of funds to overseas entities.
Rigging changes everything from a legal standpoint.
Through 2024 and 2025, the ED formally registered matters and pursued actions against both the company and, critically, the promoters themselves, focusing intensely on the alleged laundering through offshore corporate structures.
The Winzo matter highlights the full, unmitigated spectrum of FEMA's punitive capabilities. We are looking at Section 3 for potential unauthorized forex dealing. We're looking at Section 4 if foreign assets or massive bank balances were held improperly in those overseas entities.
And Section 6.
And we're looking at Section 6 for outbound investment and complex cross-border settlement issues. But what stands out most prominently here, and which should concern any corporate structure, are the foreign investment and overseas investment rules.
Specifically regarding the promoters, correct, because this changes the game from corporate liability to personal liability.
Yes, emphatically. The reports specifically mention laundering through overseas entities and promoter-related structures. Under FEMA's Overseas Direct Investment, or ODI, rules, an Indian resident promoter setting up a foreign subsidiary, a joint venture, or a holding company in a place like Singapore or Dubai must adhere to incredibly strict valuation, reporting, and bona fide business requirements.
Right.
If the ED alleges that promoter-related offshore entities were not legitimate tech subsidiaries, but were merely shell structures used in the flow of illicit funds designed specifically to siphon off rigged gaming revenues from the Indian consumer, this is a severe structural violation of the ODI framework.
So what does this all mean? When we look at the trajectory of Probo and Winzo together, we are seeing a massive industry-wide chilling effect.
A very cold chill.
It is no longer just about corporate liability or paying a fine from the company treasury. The authorities are actively, aggressively piercing the corporate veil. Personal promoter liability is now squarely in the crosshairs.
Promoters cannot hide behind the corporate entity anymore.
If you are a founder and you set up a subsidiary in Singapore or Dubai because your legal team advised it was standard practice to manage your international intellectual property or your global tech stack, and your domestic Indian operation is subsequently accused of running an unpermitted real money game, your offshore subsidiaries aren't safe.
Not at all.
You, personally, as the director and promoter, could face asset attachment under PMLA and FEMA. The corporate shield, which founders rely on, is proving to be very, very thin when the ED invokes these statutes.
That is exactly the correct interpretation. The enforcement agencies are taking a holistic, global view. They are no longer looking at the Indian entity in isolation. They are looking at the entire global footprint of the promoters.
An entire footprint.
If the genesis of the capital is alleged to be tainted in India, if the very first rupee collected was from a rigged game or an illegal bet, every single offshore entity funded by that capital and every promoter directing that capital is subject to the full, devastating force of FEMA Sections 4 and 6.
This has been an incredibly dense, revealing journey through a rapidly shifting regulatory landscape. We have gone from unpacking the domestic Russian nesting dolls of financial instruments with Gameskraft to witnessing the shattering of the offshore Curacao mirage via domestic proxies.
We have covered a lot of ground.
We have analyzed the strict, deputized liability of digital toll booths like Coda payments. We have marveled at the advanced blockchain tracing capabilities deployed by the ED in the eNuggets crypto case. And finally, we have witnessed the existential challenge to core business models and the terrifying reality of personal promoter liability with Probo and Winzo.
This raises an important question, and it is how we must synthesize these disparate enforcement actions into a cohesive understanding of the regulatory environment. We must ensure a balanced representation of what is occurring.
Right, let's look at both sides.
On one hand, the gaming platforms vehemently argue that they operate legitimate, skill-based digital businesses.
Right.
They argue they are fostering technological innovation, creating jobs, and adhering to the letter of corporate law.
They see themselves as tech innovators.
Exactly. They view their offshore subsidiaries, their use of payment gateways, and their complex corporate structuring as entirely standard operating procedures for global digital tech companies. However, the enforcement agencies view these exact same mechanisms, local proxy accounts, the cryptocurrency conversions, the offshore promoter subsidiaries, the nested mutual funds as clear, deliberate, and highly orchestrated violations of FEMA Sections 3, 4, 5, and 6.
The authorities view the complexity not as business innovation, but as intentional obfuscation.
Precisely.
And that is exactly why this matters to you. If you are operating anywhere in the digital economy, whether you are writing code for a new app, investing venture capital in a startup, or sitting on a corporate board advising founders, this enforcement timeline we have just walked through shows that regulatory patience has completely evaporated.
It is gone.
The days of exploiting legal gray areas or hiding behind a server in Malta are definitively over. As we have seen, the tracing capabilities of the state have evolved from simple bank audits of local branches to highly sophisticated on-chain blockchain analysis and the aggressive unmasking of offshore proxy networks.
You cannot hide in the code.
Ignorance of FEMA's expansive reach is no longer a viable or even a logical defense strategy.
I strongly urge you to take these compliance issues with the utmost seriousness. The penalties under the Foreign Exchange Management Act are severe. They often involve the outright confiscation of the assets involved in the contravention.
Outright confiscation.
And when these violations are clubbed with the Prevention of Money Laundering Act, they carry incredibly stringent criminal liabilities, including imprisonment. It is not merely a cost of doing business.
Absolutely. The stakes could not be higher. But if you are navigating these incredibly complex waters, you do not have to do it alone. For specific, tailored guidance on these highly technical issues, we strongly instruct you to contact the ODFC FEMA Help Desk.
They are the experts.
You can reach their specialized team via their 24-hour quick help portal at helpdesk.fema.in, and you can also send a detailed email to ask@fema.in. I will repeat that for you. The portal is helpdesk.fema.in, or you can email ask@fema.in. They possess the highly specialized, granular expertise required to analyze these intricate cross-border compliance matters and audit your structures.
It is highly advisable and, frankly, imperative to preemptively evaluate your corporate structures, your payment flows, and your compliance reporting, rather than waiting to react to a search and seizure notice from the Enforcement Directorate.
I want to leave you with one final lingering thought to mull over as we conclude. We began this deep dive by noting how the ED has masterfully adapted. They have mastered the tracing of standard fiat currency, they have successfully pierced the veil of domestic proxy accounts, and they are now actively mapping decentralized cryptocurrency ledgers.
They have evolved.
They have followed the value across every conceivable push. But as digital ecosystems become entirely self-contained, particularly with the rise of the metaverse and complex Web3 gaming, how will the regulatory definition of a cross-border value transfer evolve next?
That is fascinating.
Imagine this scenario. If a player sitting in India trades a highly valuable, rare digital sword or a cosmetic skin within a game ecosystem to a player sitting in South Korea, no fiat currency ever crosses a traditional banking border.
None at all.
The bank accounts remain untouched, but massive tangible economic value has just transferred jurisdictions. Will the mere cross-border transfer of in-game digital items, or perhaps even the transfer of monetizable behavioral player data, soon trigger intense FEMA scrutiny under a radically new, expanded definition of assets?
It is only a matter of time.
The boundaries of regulation are not static. They are expanding rapidly to catch up with technology. Keep an eye on the horizon. Thank you for joining us on